I sat down with a middle school math teacher recently, right after she had taught. I had been able to catch the last 10 minutes of her class. And 10 minutes later, she said to me, I can do that tomorrow when she heard my ideas. How often do you hear that in your feedback conversations? Here's what I want you to know about that moment. Every new idea was built from what was already in her room, on her walls, in her slides, in the routines she's been consistently building all year long. She just couldn't see how all of the pieces could fit together. And that's what I want to show you today. What it looks like when an observer knows a teacher well enough, knows enough about how students learn, and knows enough about those students to walk into a room and see what the teacher has built before the teacher can. That's feedback on the fly, and it is a learnable skill. Feedback on the fly doesn't work if you're a stranger. It works because of what comes before it. I had been in this teacher's room in November. We had talked for a long time about her space. She gave me a tour after the students left, what was working, what was frustrating her. She was really focused on managing student behavior, which she needed to do. But she had been working so hard to get them to function as a class that she couldn't actually see now what she has built. Based on that original conversation, she rearranged her entire room, like moved where things were posted, moved where her supplies were, how they moved around the room. She also did a reset completely on class expectations after the winter break. She had students co create a much simpler but focused class contract and in language driving toward ownership. Things like, we'll keep talking about math during math time. Ask to before the teacher. She sent me pictures. She was genuinely excited about the impact those changes were having on her students. So when I walked back in, I walked in knowing her story. I walked in knowing what she cares about. I walked in knowing what her students needed to take the next step toward owning their own learning. That prior knowledge is what makes 10 minutes in a classroom incredibly impactful. Without it, you're just visiting. With it, you're a knowledgeable thought partner. When I walked in, I drew the room. I started mapping what I saw, and what I saw stopped me. She had so much already in place, fast transitions, clear routines, this really cool good struggle ladder that she had moved to a more visible place. That class contract, huge font up front, slides with clear station directions, a timer running. She was pulling a small group. Not one student came up to her table to interrupt. Huge in a middle school class. At the end of the lesson, students moved to a four-corner self-reflection, which is something she had been trying, didn't like moved instantly. She had been so focused on behavior, she hadn't stepped back to see she wasn't managing behavior anymore. She was really building the infrastructure for students to own their own learning. She needed to hear that. Not because she didn't know, but because when you're in it, when you're in that work every day, you just sometimes stop seeing what you've built. You also need to be celebrated, and that's what a trusted second set of eyes can do. As I was mapping the room, I was doing what our book calls understanding how teachers create outcomes, using what I understand about how learners learn. Not just what was happening, but why it was happening. What did she do that caused students to self manage? What allowed her small group to run without interruption? And then where was that gap between what she had and what she was still trying to do? We sat down right after her class during her planning meeting, and she was super pensive about station productivity because she knew some partnerships weren't working. And we scanned the Google Slides. It was like a maze activity to solving problems, and there was a pretty decent amount of variance in how much students had completed. So I said, okay, let's think about what you tell them at the beginning of the station work. And she pulled up her slide, and it was directions shown once, and then she would call, okay, wrap up and switch. So I looked around the room. Class contract was on the wall. What if they referenced these before they switched? She saw it right away. And then I looked at the window, my favorite good struggle ladder. It has levels, it has strategies, it's in their language, it's already up there. What if before they start the next station, they named where they were on this good struggle ladder? Not just am I on task and am I persevering, which that's awesome for, but if you add in what the station's learning intentions are, they can also process, am I learning what I need to be learning at this station? So, what needs to be on the direction slide to help them see what the stations are meant to build? Then we chatted about that four corner reflection. She noticed they were having trouble choosing corners. She noticed that a week or two ago. And so she had added these funny, familiar cartoon images to help them remember the differences between the four levels. So she had general criteria. And when I was there, she gave them this prompt of, how do you feel about volume? How's it going? General, feeling based. Three students had selected the wrong corner, and she called them out because she thought they were actually higher than what they had chosen. And then the rest of the class was crowded into corner two. So we started to process, how do we increase their accuracy? Because on the board, she has the learning target and the language target printed, but didn't call that out when she asked them to reflect. She also has this cool step where she co creates criteria with students using the target, and she calls it steps for success. Identify the parts, plan, calculate, justify. Hold on, that's four parts, four steps, four corners, perfect match. She just needed a more specific prompt using the learning and language targets, which step best describes where you are, and then also to ensure she adds an opportunity for kids to talk before they moved or when they move. Why did you choose that corner? So the routine that she already has built can become a more genuine self-assessment, a more specific self-assessment. She just needed to refine the structure to increase the accuracy in their reflections. And she just needed someone to show her what she had already built and how to do that. And then she said, I can do that tomorrow. That moment happened because of how the conversation started. I didn't lead with next steps. I led with what I saw, every intentional move I saw and the impact it was having on her students. Our book calls that building on strengths. It is not a compliment sandwich. It is a strategic move. When you help a teacher clearly see what they have built before you discuss the gap, they see the gap differently, not as a failure, as a next step in something that's already working. And every next step that we landed on, the contract before the stations, the struggle ladder between rotations, the steps for success criteria and learning expectations connected to the four corners, we found the highest leverage moves between where she is and where she's trying to go. I needed to use a series of strategies in organizing my thinking while I was observing so I could maximize my evidence collection time. I had to use determine the cause of outcomes. I had to focus on overall impact and using research based strategies. So our feedback on the fly was grounded, nothing new to build, nothing new to buy, nothing new to plan, one connection between things she already had. That I can do that tomorrow. That's a teacher who sees they don't have it yet, but they see a next step as attainable because they see how their actions impact students. That's self efficacy. That's what we're working toward. Feedback on the fly only works when three things are true. You know the teacher, their story, their goals, what they've tried. You know how students learn, what ownership actually requires, what the conditions for self reflection look like, and why behavior and academic ownership are related but not the same. And you have the observation skills to process in real time so that when a teacher has 10 minutes, you're ready. Not tomorrow, right now, because that's when it matters. Every teacher deserves a visitor who knows them well enough to say, look at what you've built, and then can help them use it to take one more step forward. You, as an observer, can get better at this. Most teachers walk out of feedback conversations having written nothing down or maybe just said, okay, thanks. That's not on them, that's on the feedback. If you're an observer trying to make the shift from using compliment sandwiches or feedback that is not resulting in teachers taking next steps, consider if you are engaging in strengths-based feedback that allows the teacher to build right from where they are what they have in their rooms to try something tomorrow. If this resonated, check out our downloads and like and follow for more strategies.